a lot of dishes. Cornbread's perfect for them, and it's also used in things like dressing and stuff like that. So it is a great, just solid dish to be able to make. Incidentally, when I'm thinking about cornbread, I'm always going to be thinking about my pappaw. So I'm wearing my Superman shirt because he was like my Superman growing up and everything. And so, you know, always think about pappaw as I make cornbread. That was one of his specialties. Okay, so I'm going to go over a few things, basically just what we're going to need. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is some good cornmeal. Okay, so this is actual cornmeal, not cornmeal mix. Okay, I am lucky enough that I live somewhere where I can get awesome locally sourced cornmeal. Okay, so stone ground. This is from DeKalb, Mississippi. Okay, so this isn't too far. It's a couple hours from where I live, but there are some stores a little closer than that sell it by here. So I'm lucky and I can have that. Okay, if you can't get that, I recommend Martha White. Right, you should be able to get this at most grocery stores. Okay, so Martha White's self-rising cornmeal. Okay, the self-rising is good for this recipe. You don't need maybe as much baking soda, things like that, if you want to use the self-rising. So Martha White self-rising. And another one that's a little harder to find, but you might be able to find, would be Dixie Lily. Okay, and there are plenty of other brands, right? The main thing you want to look for is, I use white cornmeal, but the main thing you want is cornmeal and not cornmeal mix. Okay, cornmeal mix is something different, okay, or cornbread mix. I don't know, I think they call it cornmeal mix usually, or cornbread mix, right? But we want just the cornmeal, okay? Okay, the other thing you're gonna need is a good cast iron pan. Okay, this actually is not, I like triangle cornbread. I like traditional triangle cornbread like this. This is actually not my favorite pan. Believe it or not, I somehow lost my old cornbread pan, so this is fairly new. And I used to have one that was a triangle pan with a handle, and I like that much better. I'm still looking for that. But this is still just Lodge cast iron, and it's a triangle pan. You can also use like a biscuit pan if you want, a cast iron biscuit pan. It'll pretty much do the same thing with that. And then if you like to slice your cornbread and you don't want it made in individual pieces, that's going to be like a more cake-like cornbread, that type of thing, then you can use a pan like this. Okay, all of this is just Lodge cast iron that I'm using. And again, I'm going to use a triangle pan here today. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is actually start preheating my oven. Cook cornbread real high, so I'm preheating it at 450. And I'm going to line my pan. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in all of the triangles. If I was using the non-triangle pan, I just have a little layer of oil down on the bottom. That's to help me get a nice crisp bottom on my cornbread, or top, depending on how you look at it, right? So I didn't realize that oil wasn't open. All right, so I'm gonna come and I've just got a little vegetable oil, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of vegetable oil in each triangle location. Okay, and then I'm gonna set this in the oven that's preheating. While I make my batter, okay? And, you know, it's kind of hard for me to pour this. It's not pouring great, but I'd like them to not be, to just really coat it. This is a little bit more than I'd like, particularly in this one, right? This one's probably about the right amount of oil in there. And remember, I'm going to preheat this, so that oil is going to come out real hot. I actually have shoes on today. Okay, and I'm not going to have my daughter or dogs around while I'm pulling this out of the oven and all, because it's going to be real hot and I don't want to accidentally slosh oil or drop anything. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is I have this cornbread pan with the oil in it, and I'm just going to stick it in the oven and let the pan stay in the oven while the oven preheats up to 450. So while the pan and that oil are heating up, I'm gonna go ahead and make my cornbread batter, right? It's actually really easy. So I've got a 3/4 cup here. I love these measuring cups because they come in like 3/4 cup sizes and I don't have to do 1/4 cup 3 times, things like that. All right, so I've got a 3/4 cup that I'm gonna use to get my cornmeal. So I'm gonna take about 3/4 cup of cornmeal, and it's okay to be a little bit estimating. This is, pretty much this recipe is going to be just enough, so that's slightly over, right? But just enough for that triangle pan. If you're doing a little bit bigger pan or one that's not separated out like that, this would fit the triangle pan and that biscuit pan I showed you. But if you were doing the other one, you might want to just increase it just a tad with how much you have, right? So that's a 3/4 cup. All right, y'all, changing it up a little bit. I'm actually gonna be using the Martha White self-rising cornmeal, right? And so I'm gonna be using this one instead. Okay. I got everything cleaned out. That other bag was contaminated, okay? So I've checked this one, and I've been keeping this one in plastic. The other bag I hadn't been keeping, so let's try again. Okay, so just a little bit more than that 3/4 cup. Putting that in there. Okay. So double checking that everything looks normal in there. Okay. So here we go with the 3/4 cup of cornmeal, and so now I'm using the self-rising cornmeal. Okay, and again, this is probably the easiest to find at the store. Okay, then this is just flour. So I'm going to do a heaping tablespoon of flour. Okay, put that in there. All right, I'm gonna throw in some salt and pepper. All right, just a couple shakes of salt. This isn't coming out super fast. Okay. And a little bit of pepper. All right. And also, even though it's self-rising, I'm going to use a tad of baking soda. Okay, if I was using non-self-rising, then I would use probably even a little bit more baking soda. Okay, but I'm just going to do a couple pinches, right? Right, and so that is my dry mixture. Okay, so all it is 3/4 cup cornmeal, a big old tablespoon of flour, and a couple pinches of baking soda, and a little bit of salt and pepper. Okay, so next I'm going to add in my wet ingredients, which is just going to be a cup of buttermilk and an egg. All right, so I use full-fat buttermilk, so this one's gourmet, sometimes Bulgarian style. I've tried to avoid the low-fat. If low-fat's all you can find, that won't be a big issue. But I like to use full-fat buttermilk, right? And so I'm going to do a generous cup of the full-fat buttermilk. Right, and then I'm also going to do 1 egg, okay? All right, so we're going to stir all that up. All right, you can check out that batter consistency right here. It's a thick enough batter, right? And now I much prefer crispy, kind of thin and moist cornbread, right? So I'm actually gonna add a little more Wesson oil inside here too. The Wesson oil that we're heating up, that's gonna make it the crispy outside. That's gonna basically kind of let us fry the outside of the cornbread as we pour it into the pan. All right, but I'm also going to put a little Wesson oil in my batter, okay? Right, if you want kind of more cake-like and dry cornbread, then maybe you don't want to use Wesson oil in the batter or not use as much. All right, so I'm going to stir that up. All right, and you can see that batter consistency. Okay, now so we've got the cornbread batter ready to go, right? And I'm still waiting on the oven to finish preheating, but it's really close. So remember, I was preheating the oven to 450. Okay, so it's really close, so I'll be able to take that pan out in just a minute once the oven gets completely preheated. I'm gonna be sure and have some really good, this one is actually a little thinner than I'd like, this one's pretty good, but some good gloves to pull that really hot cornbread pan out of the oven. And again, you really need to be careful. I certainly wouldn't have little dogs and kids underfoot as I'm trying to pull the cornbread pan out of the oven with that hot grease in there. You want to be real careful that you're not going to spill the grease anywhere. You don't want to spill it on your feet. Again, I wear, well, I don't always wear shoes, but I'm wearing shoes today for this video, just to kind of help if anything does slosh, right? And so I'm just going to pull the pan out with the hot grease, and I'm going to move it straight to my oven surface, and then I'm going to pour the batter into the pan, and then we'll bake that cornbread. Okay, so I'll bake it at that 450 for about 20 minutes, right? And so, I mean, we're pretty much done, other than just making sure we don't spill that grease when we pull the cornbread pan out, and filling up our cornbread pan with our batter, okay? I'll probably use this spatula to help me with that. And again, I'm gonna have both hands. Those Lodge pans can be kind of heavy pulling them out of the oven and stuff too. So make sure I have both hands protected with some, the best gloves or pot holders I have. Right. Okay, also doesn't hurt to have your vent on. I know it's gonna be a little loud, but this will be kind of smoky, okay? That oil smokes pretty bad, so I'm just gonna pull the pan out. We're up at 450 right now. Keep it on, and again, careful not to spill. right, and now I've got my oven door open, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw this back in the oven, okay? Again, try not to spill anything on me. And I'm setting my timer for about 20 minutes. We'll check on it then. Okay, one thing to note, that recipe did go a little further than it usually does, so I was probably a little over generous. We'll check on it. That 20 minutes, we may have to do a little more, a little less, right? But we'll check on it in about 20 minutes and see where we're at. All right, so we're about 10 minutes in. Let's just take a look, see what it's looking like. All right, we might be going a little bit faster than that initial 20-minute. We'll keep checking on it. Okay. We can see here it's starting to get a little brown around the edges, rising about as well as we'd like. All right, so they're ready to come out and did not need quite the full time, closer to 14, 15 minutes. Okay.